Do the quiet thing. That wasn't quiet. All right, I got to do this thing yet, huh? So we are live.
So
now.
We can get all loud and stuff now.
If anyone's actually watching, I'm sorry, but we're getting off to an interesting start tonight.
At least the recorder still. I had to get my loudness on.
Yeah, right. We can be loud now. All right, so intro.
No, if you want to, you gotta if you want to clear your throat, you gotta mute yourself.
I don't have a. Hold on. That work? Oh.
You do it in Google Hangouts. I mean, it's not hard.
So I did a thing, and my mic is out now.
You got really faint.
There, is it working now?
Oh, now it works.
Apparently, punching my desk is it's a bad thing to do.
Don't punch your desk.
Oh my god!
All right, I'll shut up now. You can
we're never gonna do this tonight. Sorry, guys. Iron Sysadmin podcast is blame the holiday.
Somebody fed him Yager.
It's not Yager. It's Jaeger. Jägermeister. Anyway. Facebook is tracking you. Going to war over malware. Walmart spurns Amazon. Windows 10 ends ransomware protection. Why NotPetya should keep you awake at night. Girl Scouts meet cybersecurity. And we're talking about Docker basics. This week on Iron Sysadmin, episode 18. Welcome to the Iron Sysadmin podcast, your source for IT news, commentary, and a healthy dose of paranoia. All right, welcome to episode 18, where it's really hot outside. I'm in an attic and I'm sweating. I'll stop there. And it's almost the 4th of July, so we're in great moods tonight. Someone also fed me some Jägermeister, so I'm going to keep on drinking. It's fun.
I'm in a basement, and you made me turn my air conditioner off, so
I'm not there yet.
Listen, not there yet, but I'm going to be sweating later.
You are able to run your air conditioner and your computer at the same time in your office, correct?
Only when I'm not recording, otherwise I get yelled at.
No, I mean, like, you can physically do it, and it doesn't trip break things, right? Because that's what happens when I run my air conditioner.
It hasn't yet. It hasn't yet.
So if I have to be too hot in this attic apartment or attic office, then you have to be too hot in your basement office.
I see how it is.
Basement, okay. Doesn't that give you some cooling effect?
A little bit.
If I was in my basement, I'd be like wearing a sweatshirt right now. It's so cold down there.
I'm in my undisclosed basement location.
Undisclosed. Now you're in an undisclosed underground location. Is it only partially underground?
Yeah, I guess technically it's only partially underground.
Good, close enough.
Whatever.
Close enough.
And someday I'll clean my office, which will be about the same time that I build my new shelves and make it all pretty.
It's getting better every episode.
That's because things just move.
That's one way to do it. Just move, shift things
really,
around. It looks better, right?
Haven't been able to put anything away in a while.
Yeah,
out of space. Yeah. Anyway,
all right. So here we are, episode 18. Awesome. Soon, I mean, we're coming up on episode 24. That's going to mark a year. I mean,
yeah.
That's like what, 3 months away?
You talked me into this insanity.
Well, yeah. So a year should be November. I think it's when we started, right?
So let's see, episode 18. Well, I mean, one of our listener feedbacks suggested that we do Dritz as to keep up with the episode numbers, but I'll be honest.
Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, Dritz.
Okay.
Dritz Duerden. I've read a couple of the books, but I'm by no means close to, and I'm not even sure which one is book one. So
yeah, I had thrown a few on my reading list, and I haven't gotten around to them yet. But
we're gonna have to do some research before we can choose which one's 18.
Yeah, right. Which one is one? Now start reading.
So he also suggested Star Trek episodes, but I mean, which do we start with the original series? I mean, that's a religious war. We may not want to go there.
Yeah, right. Darmok, where the walls fell.
So 18 episodes, and we're still here.
We're still here, and we're still as disorganized as ever. We're supposed to be talking about the news, aren't we?
Oh, right. News. So have you heard about this? It's called The Facebook.
The Face.
The Face. The Book of Faces.
The Book of Faces. Yeah, they're in the news pretty often. Seems.
Well, let's see. Book of Faces sounds like a horror movie.
It does.
Facebook, pretty much a horror movie. So
yeah,
it works.
Yeah. I mean, it's a horror movie for a privacy lawyer, which is what this comes down to. So the Guardian is reporting this.
So
I've realized we have a bad habit of not reporting our sources. So this is from the Guardian. Continue.
Yes, so this is an interesting one. So, this I don't remember what the actual lawsuit was, but anyway, turns out Facebook can track your browsing even after you logged out, according to this judge. He dismissed the lawsuit that accused Facebook of tracking users' activity, and the judge basically said, yeah, you're kind of on your own, and it's your job to keep your stuff private.
So if you want to be private, delete your Facebook account. Is that what he's getting at?
Well, see, I mean, I have no proof of this, but I'm pretty sure I have a Facebook profile. Even though, I mean, it's been alleged before, and I don't have a Facebook account.
Yeah, right. So if people, or sites you visit that utilize Facebook's cookie sharing could theoretically be building a profile on you.
Right.
And it wouldn't be that hard for them to figure out who you are and build a profile based on you, so that if you did ever sign up for an account, they could actually start advertising at you on day one.
Yes.
No learning required.
No learning required. And they're pretty aggressive about it. I mean, you've got Facebook like buttons everywhere. They can pretty much track you
absolutely
from site to site to site to site. And did we? I don't think we actually talked about it on the podcast. There was an interesting article I read the other day, which I will dig up and put in the show notes, about a piece of JavaScript that sends, as you type into forms, it is reporting all that information back to a third party. So they're basically tracking you whether you submit the form or not. And this thing is apparently quite aggressive, but I'll see if I can track down the link on it. But I mean, it just basically goes back to say, like, if you've loaded a web page and anything that you do on that web page can potentially be fed back to whoever. That's anything you type on the web page, anything you click on the web page, hell, even your mouse movements can theoretically be sent back.
Yeah, I mean, there are absolutely things that can track mouse movements. I mean, that's the way Google's CAPTCHA works.
Yep.
I'm not a robot CAPTCHA. It's when you move your mouse down to click on the little checkbox that says "I'm not a robot." It's tracking your mouse movements to see if they look robotic or not.
So if I can move my mouse in perfectly straight lines in 90-degree angles, it'll think I'm a robot?
No, I think it's more like if your mouse jumps from across the screen directly to the checkbox without moving, it considers you a robot. Or if it moves in a two-angular, I don't know all the specifics, but I
wonder how that works with tablets and phones.
I don't know. Well, I mean, they can obviously tell if you're on a tablet or a phone based on your user agent string. So maybe they have different logic for that.
Anyway, neither here nor there. Anyway, Facebook can track you. The judge in this case has said,
imagine that Facebook can track you.
You know, The judge said you should use stuff like incognito mode, or there's an opt-out tool that they mention here, and then Facebook won't intercept your communications
until they figure out how to. In which case,
I just want to point out that this judge knows what like technology is, and I'm kind of impressed.
That actually is impressive. I wonder if he's younger.
I wonder if Facebook took him aside and said, "Okay, look here, let me give you a crash course."
I'm just going to feed you this information. Tell them this. Call it good.
So, moving right along.
All right. So, obviously, Facebook can track you. That's awesome.
So, have you heard about this NotPetya thing?
Yeah, I'm wondering where the name came from. Like WannaCry was an obvious like WCry went to WannaCry, right? So,
well, there was the Petya malware.
Oh,
this is the NotPetya malware.
Not Petya.
Yep.
Huh. I'm not sure if I even read this thing. We were looking at all the other articles, and I didn't. I think I missed this one.
I heard about this one the other day. So basically, there's a researcher at NATO who basically has said, if this particular malware was state-sponsored, then they can consider it a violation of sovereignty, and that could potentially lead to retaliation and war.
Right. So all they need to do is 100% positively attribute something, malware, to its author.
There's dice for that.
There are dice for that. So the thing I'm worried about when you say this is like, oh yeah, it was totally the U.S. that did this, right? Like all we have to do is say that.
Hang on.
Oh, you actually have attribution dice?
It was North Korea with the candlestick in the parlor.
I always preferred the crowbar myself.
Oh well. No, those are. I don't have the attribution dice. These are my. Which ones are these? These are my software engineering dice.
Okay, so no, I mean my point is like, since we know attribution is hard, right, and it's almost impossible to really track down the source of these things, making a claim like, if this is nation state sponsored, it could cause a war, is kind of scary, because like at what level are you sure enough? Right.
Well, and look at it this way: most of the nation-state attacks, I mean, have been argued that you don't need a nation-state to create this stuff. You know, the original crap. What was the name of the one that they attacked the centrifuges with? I forget. Anyway,
that would be
that one.
Stuxnet.
That one. What's that?
That was Stuxnet.
Yes, Stuxnet. So that one, you could potentially argue that since they went after the centrifuges of, of a nuclear power, maybe you could argue that that was state sponsored. But outside of that, most of the other ones have been like take again,
this is all like conjecture.
Right. But take something.
How does that sort of thing stand up in when you're trying to justify war?
I don't know. Like, but that's what I'm saying.
Like one country shoots a nuke at the other. It's pretty obvious who did it, right? One country launches malware at another.
No, somebody totally hacked my nuke. Somebody hacked my nuke. I didn't shoot it. It was somebody else.
You've watched too many movies.
But look at the Sony hack. Everybody attributed that to North Korea. Maybe it was. It seems a little petty.
And that was
maybe it was
specific. That was over a freaking movie because they thought they were upset about a movie. That's
right.
Kind of. You're right. Petty. Petty is a good way to describe it.
Right. And maybe
maybe that's the way the North Koreans are. I don't know, but
neither do I. I mean, that could have been legit. It could have been North Korea.
Yeah.
I don't know. It seemed kind of petty, but it wasn't. My understanding is that it was not the most sophisticated attack in the world. So maybe it doesn't need to be a nation state. And even the sophisticated attacks don't have to be nation state. So, we've seen some pretty amazing things come out of like DEF CON and DerbyCon. And, these are not state actors. These are
No,
just
they're security
bored,
researchers or just,
they're just bored
white
kids.
hats. Yeah, bored kids. I don't know if I'd call them kids. They're bored security professionals.
All right. Have you heard about Walmart?
Walmart. Who are they? Oh, they're those people that compete with Amazon, right?
Well, I mean, among other people, among other companies.
How's that old fashioned treating you?
That's pretty good. I'm liking it.
Among other companies, right? So I added this one. I got to admit, I haven't really read deeply through this article. It's another one that, well, whatever. The title really says it all. Apparently, Walmart is telling their partners to avoid AWS's cloud solely because AWS is, of course, as we know, run by Amazon, and Amazon is Walmart's competitor.
Right.
And Amazon, has of course made this move to purchase Whole Foods, which I assume Walmart sees as a shot across the bow.
Right. So there's a couple things that I find interesting here. First of all, the other article that I read about this was a little bit more heavy-handed in that Walmart apparently said, if you're our partner, you cannot run your services on AWS.
I heard something. I actually heard a related article, which I wasn't able to add to the show notes, but supposedly there are certain shipping companies that Walmart has told, if you move Amazon's products, we won't do business with you. Shipping companies. It's like, come on. It's like, I'm sorry, FedEx, because you work with Amazon, you can't move our products. What?
Yeah, I don't know where that falls under the legal framework of things, but I mean, it's,
right.
You know, you don't want to deal with somebody who's working with the competition. They want to freeze out the competition, I guess.
But I mean, in this case, it's like if you're a partner of Walmart's, you can't, if they figure out that you're using AWS's services, they're going to stop doing business with you? Like, come on.
Apparently.
Amazon is like the number one cloud provider right now. How? I don't understand how this is going to work in any way other than Walmart shooting themselves in the cyber foot.
Cyber foot? Really?
Yeah, well, cyber.
I can't believe you. I
said cyber. Okay. Drink some of that old fashioned.
Drink that beer. Drink it.
I will.
Drink that beer. In the meantime, the other thing I found fascinating is that Walmart apparently looks like it may actually be building its own cloud. According to this article, Walmart has more than 170,000 cores.
I have heard rumblings of this in the OpenStack communities for quite a while, that Walmart is working on building their own cloud. It's like, and to me, it sounded really silly. It's like AWS is not direct competition with Amazon or with Walmart. Obviously, it helps line Amazon's pockets, but why Walmart would build their own cloud following after Amazon seems, I don't know. It just seems like very copycat. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, the other interesting part is that OpenStack makes no bones about it. Like they're not competing with AWS per se. They're an alternative, but they're also trying to make sure that they integrate quite well with all of the big cloud providers so that you can bounce from provider to provider.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, the OpenStack project is very open. It's in the name. The very idea is that it's supposed to be interoperable and everything's supposed to be an API and it's supposed to be easy to interact with this piece, that piece, or a competitor's piece, right? Yeah. Because OpenStack itself isn't in it for money. OpenStack is a project that may be repackaged under a name that makes money on it, like Red Hat does, or like Rackspace does,
or any of a dozen other people.
Walmart could do.
Yeah, I can't wait till Oracle's Unbreakable Stack comes out.
Yeah, right. Unbreakable Stack. We've coined that term right now, or are they actually calling it that?
I have no idea. I just figured they were going to throw it in there.
So somewhere. if we could trademark that now, maybe we could sue Oracle later.
So I had to play with Oracle Linux today.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it pretty much works exactly
I've never touched it, so I'm only saying
well,
that
it's a
because
Red
it
Hat
has the
derivative.
Oracle name on it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, right.
it's almost. I mean, it's a respin of Red Hat.
Yeah, it's like CentOS or whatever else, right?
Yeah, pretty much. So
except it's unbreakable.
Yeah.
Did you break it?
Well, it didn't have all the features that I needed, so I went to something else.
Why were you even looking at it? Maybe
because you don't want to know.
I don't want to know.
It was a dark part of my day. No. We're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Windows. Wait, dark. I don't know. I can't get out of the darkness. Windows 10.
Windows 10 gets built-in protection against most ransomware attacks. And there's a nice little picture in the article. Oh, this is from, where's this from? The Hacker News.
Hacker News.
There's a nice little picture in here that has like this little radio button that says on or off for ransomware protection.
How much have you played with Windows 10?
It just seems so ridiculous. Well, I mean, my laptop here. What did I just drop? Oh, USB cable.
Important.
My laptop here. Sorry, we're not sponsored by Dell, but they're cheaper than Apple.
Put your hand over the top. We're not sponsored by Hack5 either, but they are awesome.
They are. All right, there. We're not sponsored by this nameless computer company, but they're cheaper than Apple. Anyway, my laptop here came with Windows 10 on it. And of course, I wanted to run Fedora, but I also have some video games I like to play. And, well, they don't run on Fedora. So, unfortunately, I have to muddle through Windows 10 every so often, mainly so I can play something like Guild Wars. Or Fallout. I've got Fallout on there, Fallout 4.
I find Windows 10 to be incredibly frustrating. It feels like it is so incredibly dumbed down.
Well,
it's like
Windows.
An insult to my intelligence to use it.
It's Windows.
Like, honestly, I'm not trying to be.
I have the same problem, but it's not just with Windows 10. It's with Windows in general. After I've run Fedora for long enough and I go back to Windows, I feel like I have put my training wheels back on.
Yeah, Windows, and maybe Windows 8. I mean, so I kind of...
Well, see, with Windows 8, you just couldn't use it.
Well, I really stopped using Windows around XP. I played with Vistas a little bit, but XP was really kind of the end of it for me. And Windows 10, like, look, there is no reason to have, like, 2 inches of space around a sliding button just for on and off.
Yeah, well,
like it feels like a child's
Well, the
toy.
thing with Windows 10 is, and I think Windows 8, is that they redesigned the UI so that it would be cleaner for a touch interface. So a lot of the UI elements have that extra space around them, so it's easier to not hit the wrong option when you're using it on a touchscreen.
Maybe they should write more accurate software.
Well, maybe. I'm really just sort of. I'm not trying to defend them. I don't. I don't love Windows.
Well, I mean,
it has its place.
It works.
Like I said, it's great for playing my video games. When I need to get work done, I boot back into Fedora.
Yeah, I mean, that said, I use my Xbox for video games. Okay, anyway, so this story. So Windows 10 added... Right, okay. Yeah. Windows 10 added built-in protection for ransomware attacks.
Yeah, and I wanted to dig deeper into what exactly they've introduced, simply because I'm curious. I recently started using an app from Cyber Reason. You've probably heard about it if you listen to Paul's. Ransom Free, which, I mean, I haven't tried to install any ransomware to see if it works or not, but it's a very lightweight, or feels lightweight, application that basically just looks for activity that looks like ransomware. Like, all of a sudden there's a whole bunch of encryption jobs running on your files, and it tries to prevent it from finishing.
So
right. I'm curious if they've implemented something similar, or what it is that they're doing here to prevent ransomware on Windows.
It's on the Windows side, so what they're probably doing is making it as hands off as possible. So they're just kind of There's probably a built-in whitelist of these applications are allowed to touch things and these aren't.
Yeah, I mean, app whitelisting is one thing, but that we know that in an ever-changing market of ransomware, I don't think that just app whitelisting is going to do the job.
I don't know that I agree with that.
You think?
Okay, so I'm on a Mac, right? Not Windows environment, but I would hope that maybe there's tools that are similar. So I use two interesting tools on my Mac. One is called Little Snitch. So Little Snitch is like a crazy firewall product. Basically, every time it sees a new connection that it has never seen before, or it doesn't have a rule for, rather, it pops up a box that says like, hey, this thing, this application or whatever is trying to make a connection, and here's all the information about it. Do you want to allow this? And then you have a bunch of options. Now, it's when you first install it, obviously, it takes a little while to sort of start training it to the things that you want to allow and not allow. But it catches things. So if I go to a web page that has one of those cool background pop-up thingies that steals all sorts of data that is not running on a normal port that a web browser would be running on, it pops up and says like, hey, your web browser is trying to connect to this weird port. Do you want to allow that?
Trying to do this thing that's weird about web browsers.
So I've caught a couple applications talking to weird locations that I've been able to block.
Right.
The other piece of software that's newer that that's actually, I believe, still a beta, comes from F-Secure, and it's called Xfence. So it takes that same logic.
Wait, F-Secure still exists?
Yep. So it takes that same logic and it applies it to file and folder access. So if an unknown application or a new application or whatever tries to access a file or a directory, it pops up a note that says like, hey, this thing's trying to do something. Do you want to allow that or not? And that pretty much stops. I mean, that would stop malware in its tracks, assuming the malware is not written to work around that specific product, but it's a little bit more up in your face. But I don't know. I think it works well.
So while you were going on about your Mac, I found a nice little piece in the article here. The anti-ransomware feature, dubbed controlled folder access, is part of the Windows Defender, or part of Windows Defender, that blocks unauthorized applications from making any modifications to your important files located in certain protected folders. And it does go on to say that there is an application whitelist that can, applications on a whitelist can only access protected folders. So but I'd imagine that. Sorry, what?
What's a protected folder, and how do you add more?
I mean, I'm guessing that this is going to work similar to what do they call it? The UAC, I think, where an application tries to run administrator privileges, and you have to say yes or no. I'm going to say that this is probably going to show up in a similar way, where if an application that you don't trust or that hasn't been trusted previously tries to do something onto your protected folders, air quotes for those of you that are not watching the video, that it'll prompt you and say like, this thing's trying to access your My Documents or whatever. What do you want me to do?
This is very much how Xfence works.
Yeah.
Well, I think Xfence is probably more fine-grained. This seems like if you allow the app, you allow the app to the entire folder, period. You can go to the file level with Xfence, but same idea. So yeah, I'm seeing documents, pictures, movies, and desktop are designated as being compulsorily, that's a weird word, protected by default.
Compulsorily. That is a weird word.
And you cannot remove them as protected folders. So,
well,
why is Windows not like the Windows directory not a protected folder?
Well, so the thing with the Windows directory is you can reinstall that.
Yeah, but
like you're not generally putting the files that you need backed up in your Windows directory. You're putting them in your My Documents or whatever.
Cool. So they won't overwrite my files, but they can still DOS attack my machine.
Well, sure, right. I think the point is that they're trying to make this as out of your way as possible.
Yep.
I mean,
I get it.
If they made the Windows directory protected, then every time you install an application, you'd be like, yeah, go ahead, do your thing. Yep. and then you'd end up numb to the yes/no button, right?
Right. I get it.
Well, anyway,
It's what I kind of like about Little Snitch and X-Fence. But anyway, I don't want to talk about my Mac. You seem to get upset about that.
moving on.
All right.
So, if you have any dealings in the InfoSec community, you have probably heard of a woman named Hacks for Pancakes. She writes a blog on, and I'm going to mispronounce this because I have no idea how it's supposed to be pronounced. Tisiphone? It's spelled Tizzy Phone. I think it's supposed to be pronounced Tisiphone.net. TISIPHONE.net.
And when she says she'll hack for pancakes, she's not kidding. She loves pancakes.
Yeah, I mean, I like pancakes too.
Yeah, no, she's actually brought pancakes to, I think, made something. She supplied pancakes at DerbyCon more than once. So
I can just picture her sitting in the lobby of the Hyatt with an electric griddle and pancake batter, handing out pancakes to everybody. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, that would
be awesome.
Anyway,
a bunch of drunk hackers, they would love pancakes.
So Leslie is what you would call
actual pancakes.
Leslie is what you would call one of those thought leader peoples.
Yes. So anyway, she writes a blog, and she's talking about the NotPetya malware and how it kept her awake and how it should keep you awake too. And I'm going to tell you, it's a very long read, but she basically goes into how NotPetya made use of lots of sort of off-the-shelf administrative tools that are already in your Windows box. And of course, well-known vulnerabilities in your Windows box, similar to what WannaCry did, right? Anyway, it's an interesting but long read. I recommend you go read it. Did you have any comments on it?
It's like 2 pages. Come on now.
Well, okay. So for a blog, it's a long read.
Okay. So we were discussing this briefly earlier. What the gist of it comes down to, hackers are starting to finally get to the point that we sort of thought they should have been at years ago. So, for instance, if you take phishing and spam, the complaint, the commentary on phishing and spam for years had been like, wow, they're kind of getting good at this if they could only figure out how to spell.
Did you hear there was a guy in Nigeria that died and they found millions of dollars in his apartment that he'd been trying to give away through email for years and nobody would write him back?
Yeah, no.
I saw that on social media somewhere and I had to share it.
So turns out fishers and spammers learned how to spell. And they're getting really, really good at it.
It is dark times. Dark times. The attackers have learned English.
So the same thing is happening with malware and ransomware, etc. They're getting to the point where, and whether or not they're actually able to spell or they're just using libraries that are there to be able to create these things, they're getting to the point where they can create this software that is incredibly effective. I mean, if you look at WannaCry when it first came out, I mean it swept across a good portion of the world. And everybody went, "Oh my god, patch. Patch. If you patch, it's all good because it's just a normal attack." Okay, fine.
Yeah, right. So I mean the kicker was if you had been patching, you wouldn't have even been vulnerable. Because the patch came out like a month before the malware did.
Then this NotPetya malware swept across the same area.
Yep. Using the same vulnerability.
Right, except that now it added a bunch of interestingly new vulnerabilities. It started using things like Mimikatz. This
thing wouldn't just propagate via SMB version 1. It was propagating via like freaking, we've owned your domain and we've used that to propagate. It's like, holy crap. It would
take over Active Directory and propagate to all the machines using Active Directory.
That's some scary stuff. I mean, it really is, because you may have machines that are actually patched and not vulnerable. I mean, I don't know if that's the case here with NotPetya, but
well, if you're patched against the Samba vulnerability,
right,
and a machine in the Active Directory tree is
vulnerable.
infected with NotPetya,
Yeah.
and it's able to get through and take over your domain. Which,
Right.
I mean, let's get real, it's not that hard. It doesn't matter. You're gonna
telling
end
you
up
that.
with that ransomware, because the ransomware itself is not a vulnerability. It's a piece of software that runs on your machine.
Exactly. So if you can pop DA, then you can push out software via Active Directory in some manner.
Right.
And that's some scary stuff.
Right.
It really is. I mean, it's just bad. Outright bad. This is like the stuff that penetration testers do to get into your boxes and tell you, like, hey, this is bad stuff. We recommend these things. Now the malware is doing it for you.
Right.
Except it's not telling you what the bad things were. It's just ransomwaring all of your machines.
Yeah, it's all coming to a head. So flat networks, not a good thing. Active Directory without the proper protections, not a good thing. I mean, Paul.
But I mean, a segmented network isn't even going to protect you here. I mean, I guess it could if you're crazy. But if it works,
some of it, yeah. If your Active Directory is going to get hit.
If a workstation is infected, that workstation probably can talk to your AD in such a way that if they can pop a domain admin account, they can probably propagate this thing via the domain.
Right. Now, so if you listen to Paul Security Weekly, one of the things that they've been talking about lately is the belief that, and for good reason, a default, how does this work? The default secure settings for Active Directory, do whatever you want to it. Like the recommended secure Active Directory isn't secure. They're basically saying, unless you have third-party software protecting your Active Directory domain, it's just a matter of time. You're done.
Yeah, none of which sponsor us, unfortunately.
Right.
Like they do.
And I mean, to be honest, I mean, so the software they're talking about is neat. It's an interesting method for detecting attacks, but it's nothing more than putting honeypots in your Active Directory domain.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally all it is. And, should you not, latch onto the honeypot, you're never going to get detected.
Well, I think the point of that software, and what's the name of it? Javelin Networks?
Javelin, yeah.
Javelin. The point of that software is that it puts so many honeypots.
Right.
Like there's this, it's like it puts this overlay over Active Directory that there are so many accounts there. And if the bad guy touches any of them, because they're not supposed to touch any of them, they get hit or they get blocked. Right. Which, I mean, that's a valid way, I think, to protect your Active Directory. Though it is scary that it has to come to that. It's like I have to put a bunch of bogus data in front of the bad guy. Like that's how you're protecting it.
Yep, honeypots have been out there for years. Honeypots are not a new technology. That's something that's been out there for a long time.
Absolutely, they're not.
But
they're not new.
Generally speaking, if you talk to most security professionals, they'll tell you, like, you don't really need to be playing with honeypots until you've covered all the low-hanging fruit.
Well, sure, but I mean, what are the low-hanging fruit in your Active Directory?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is, like, when it comes to Active Directory, like, don't bother with the low-hanging fruit at all. Put a honeypot in there, because, like, it's nothing else is protecting you. So now I'm not a Windows guy. I'm not a Windows admin. I don't have any certs in Windows stuff, and God knows I don't want them. But there's, and I know, yes, I get it. It's a big target, blah, blah, blah. Insert your arguments here, but there's more that can be done. I still believe, like, look at Samba. Why did Samba get hit the way it did? Because they're still supporting Samba 1. Their desire to be backwards compatible with, like, MS-DOS is
oh, right, okay. Right.
It's neat that they can still have that compatibility, but yeah.
Yeah, SMB
Yeah,
specifically, not
SMB.
Samba.
Yeah.
Samba is a project which implements SMB. To be clear for the listeners.
Yep. So because they're trying to be backwards compatible with so much, it ends up blowing up in their face eventually. Which
right,
I get it.
Right,
but
yeah, I mean,
at some point they need to cut it off.
It's the same old problem, right? You've got a bunch of old cruft laying around, and you're right. They need to cut some of that back. But it's their business model, right? That's the way they work. Yeah, I mean, they're only just now terminating SMB version 1.
I know, it's a good thing WannaCry came out.
It's basically because of WannaCry. Now, they've been recommending for like a year now that you turn that stuff off, but they haven't forced it.
What version of SMB are we up to? It's either 3 or 4, right?
3. I think it's 3. I could be wrong, but I think it's 3.
Why haven't they been saying get rid of 1 for like since 2 came out?
Since 2, right? Or at least since 3 came out.
And then when 3 comes out, they're like, no, turn off 1 and 2 because 3 is out. Not like, oh, they've been saying get rid of SMB 1 for a year. Like, sorry, SMB 1. I mean, this goes way back.
It's the same problem that like SSL and TLS hit a couple years ago, right? So it's not just a Microsoft thing. It's a
no.
It's a compatibility thing. Everyone's afraid to turn off backward compatibility for stuff because they could possibly lose a sale, they could lose a customer or whatever, right? So and that's valid, right? If you're running a business, every sale counts, right?
Turns out if you turn off TLS 1, I'm not sure if it's 1.0 or 1.1. But either way, if you turn that off, Amazon's Elastic Load Balancer doesn't work with your server anymore.
Really?
Yeah.
Awesome. I'm sure that won't be long before they fix it.
Yeah. I would hope so, but their tech support's like, it took a while to figure out what was going on. We actually had to get like packet captures and like run Wireshark.
Oh, you've actually experienced this. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Nice.
It's not like it's in a document somewhere that says like, don't do this.
All because of your paranoia.
That's called best practices.
It's in the tagline, man. It's paranoia.
Because I'm paranoid doesn't mean they're out to get not out to get me.
All right. So one more news article. I think we've talked about Leslie's blog enough. And
right. So let's move on to Girl Scouts.
Yes, the girls. I like this article, and I like it because I was a Boy Scout as a kid, and I really wish that there were more technology related scouting badges when I was a kid, because it would have been awesome. So not the Boy Scouts, but the Girl Scouts are working with Palo Alto Networks to create, I think, if I'm reading this correctly, 18 cybersecurity merit badges. I'm assuming that means 18 different, like in different, whatever.
So if they get all 18,
you could read it. You could read it as we're only making 18 of these, and 18 girls are going to get them. But I don't think that's what they mean.
If they get all 18 badges, do they automatically get their CISSP?
Maybe. I could just imagine an 8-year-old with CISSP, further degrading the value of that certificate. But anyway, the Girl Scouts of America are embracing the fact that girls want to get into technology too. And I think there's a quote somewhere in the article that says that a lot of women that are not in technology say that they're not in technology because they weren't aware that it was a field they could go into.
So I know a lot of females that are in technology that would argue that they're already there. They just want more of them.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah. Sorry, did I word that? I don't even realize.
I'm
not trying to say there are no women in
technology.
There are women in technology. Anyway, a lot of women that are not say, right? What did I say? Well, whatever. I'll listen to it later and realize how horrible I made that sound. That was not my intention. My intention was to say that. So lots of women that are not in technology weren't aware that they could pursue a career in technology. Now, I don't really understand why that is. There are lots of careers that both men or women are eligible for. There's probably lots of careers I'm not aware of. Not because the Boy Scouts didn't tell me about them, but just because I wasn't interested in them.
I think there are precious few careers that are limited to one sex or the other. And
Yeah.
I'll be honest, I can't think of any off the top of my head, but I'm sure there's at least one in each.
I can't think of any that are acceptable to talk about in mixed company.
Okay, even those can flip both ways, but anyway.
Oh, that's right. That's right. In this new age, right? Okay. So anyway, I just think it's really cool that Palo Alto Networks is working with the Girl Scouts to introduce these sort of skills to Girl Scouts, or at least girls at a young age. And I mean, they should be commended for that. Whether you like Palo Alto or not, whether you like the Girl Scouts or not. I think it's cool stuff.
Yeah, well, I think kids in general need to be introduced to this stuff early.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not just girls or boys. That's the whole point here.
Right. So I
hope that the Boy Scouts follow suit, to be honest.
I get that scouting in general normally has these, these badges that concentrate on certain areas, but in children in general, I think an education in, I think being online and how to act online and how, remember back in the day, they had this thing called, what was it called? Etiquette.
Is that some sort of a kit full
were
of
you
etiquettes?
were you around for the Usenet days when there was actually an etiquette for posting?
Yeah.
Or IRC when there was an etiquette for talking on IRC? Like these things, this stuff existed. And it's sort of disappeared. Like, and I don't want to sound like, the old man telling the kids to get off the lawn, but God damn it, get off my lawn.
Get off my lawn, you whippersnappers.
Like people in general, like a lot of people online are just, look, follow the Will Wheaton principle. Don't be a dick.
Don't be a dick.
All right.
Think we've got enough news.
Yes. Is this where we use your new cool transition music?
This is where we use my new cool transition music.
Guys, check it out.
So awesome. We're like evolving as a podcast. We have new, cooler things. We have transition
to play
music,
with new toys.
We have transition music. Yeah, because I couldn't find a better thing to do with my time other than make transition music. No, it always felt like transitions between the segments on the show were a little awkward because it was just like, hey, the news is over. Hey, what are you up to? Right?
We're transitioning now.
Now we have transitions, man. This way, when people don't want to hear us BS about like the cool little projects we're working on, they can just find that little wave in the MP3 file that looks like the transition music and skip past us.
Well, now I'm going to make noises during it just to screw up the wave.
I could just play the transition music at random and screw people up. How's that sound?
Play it backwards.
I could play it backwards. And then it tells you to go.
If movies have taught me anything, playing it backwards means you're going to summon demons.
Yeah, right. If I play the transition music backwards, you'll hear messages that say you're supposed to go kill your dog, which you shouldn't do because dogs are awesome.
And not continue that comment. All right. Oh, LV Hackers is Wednesday night.
You want to get in a flame war? Talk about what kind of pets are awesome. Talk about politics. Talk about religion.
All right. So Wednesday night, our monthly LV Hackers.
Indeed.
And this month should be interesting.
Why do you say that?
Because it's going to be competition.
Did I miss something? Where's the competition?
Yes. Whose slide is it anyway?
Oh, really? He's gonna do. Is he testing his DEFCON talk?
It's a PowerPoint night.
Awesome. That explains the name. To be honest, I had completely lost track of the month, and I didn't even remember that the meetup was this Wednesday until today.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, hey, meetup's coming.
Time flies when you're not paying attention.
Time flies when you're not paying attention. So maybe that means I do too many things. I don't know. I hope not. Because I sort of enjoy most of the things that I do. I mean, I suppose I could quit my job and have more time to do the things that I enjoy doing. Not that I don't enjoy my job, but my job pays for the things that I do.
Yeah, I'm not going
Quite
to
the
talk about
conundrum.
my job. Nope, not going to talk about my job at all. It's
I'm
not
not,
a thing I do.
all right. I'm going to try not to lure you into that one because
Nope, nope, don't, nope. I don't do it on podcasts. I don't do it on Twitter. I don't,
so.
just doesn't happen.
Yeah, I wonder where you learned that lesson. So
Keeps
anyway,
me,
if anyone that I work with is listening to, I am not thinking about quitting. That was just an off-the-cuff comment. Don't worry. Okay. So any other announcements? I think that's probably it. Oh, the stickers that I talked about last week still have not arrived. And I'm very bummed about that. And I'm in touch with...
2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. It is 2 weeks ago.
We don't do this every week.
Oh, crap. Last time we recorded.
Yeah, that.
Sorry. It's a habit. Anyway, last time we recorded 2 weeks ago, in which I had ordered the stickers several days prior. I think I ordered them Thursday before we recorded last. And they're still not here. I wrote them, 4 or 5 days ago, before, probably like last Thursday or Friday, I wrote them. And they said, oh, it could take up to 14 business days to be delivered. I thought, well, that's a long time for the U.S. Postal Service. I know they're government run and all, but they're not that slow. So I gave them more time. Maybe they do. Apparently.
No, snails. They use snails.
They might use pigeons. Pigeons would be faster than horses, probably. Anyway, my point is they're not here yet, and I think that they have been lost in the mail. And I'm trying to get a hold of their customer service, but now with the holiday and whatnot, I don't expect to hear from them until Wednesday, at the best. So hopefully, yeah, there's a holiday. That's why you may or may not hear explosions in the background of our recording.
Oh, I thought there was a firefight outside.
There could be. I mean, politics being what they are. Global climate.
I'm in an undisclosed basement in an undisclosed hick town. So firefights outside is like a thing that probably can happen.
I'm in an undisclosed attic in the same hick town. Since you moved, we're now in the same geographic location. If there were a meteor, Iron Sysadmin podcast would not have adequate redundancy. That's like worst case scenario in every DR course, right? What if a meteor were to hit your data center? Well, if a meteor were to hit our town, Iron Sysadmin would go away. I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah, you know what? I'm sorry. If a meteor hit my data center, I don't care. I've got other things to deal with. Like, I'm sorry the business is not up and running, but I'm going to go check on the family. Thanks.
Yeah, right. We always made that joke at work, and you may remember, if a meteor hit one of our data centers, it would probably hit the other. And the entire campus.
Yes. If a meteor hit the data center, the college isn't there anymore.
Yeah, I don't think we're going to have to worry about business continuity at that point.
Yeah.
The whole property will be gone.
I always loved the business people who would argue with you. Yeah, but we have to have things up and running. Like, cool. Go do it yourself because I'm going to go home.
What exactly would you be doing with that data if we got it back up for you? I mean, if you like to plan for such disasters, I mean, good on you.
Yeah, look,
there's a certain level of disaster I just can't plan for.
You are so dedicated to your job. If a meteor hit the data center and wiped it out, you're on the campus too. I'm not worried about you anymore. You're gone.
If it hit at night, I might not be on the campus. Although if a meteor hit, I mean, I don't know. I might be far enough away. I might survive. I may be the only surviving.
Nowadays, since they've made those changes, and there's no campus for you to be on anymore.
No, there's totally a campus. I'm just not welcome there.
So you're not on the campus. No, get your nerdy ass on.
This is going sideways. All right, I should stop talking about work.
All right, so we should talk about feedback.
Oh, yes. Awesome. We got feedback, and feedback is cool.
We got feedback from two.
So you may recall last time around, which was not 1 week ago, but 2, that we had solicited for some feedback because we weren't getting a lot of it. And we actually got 2 emails from 2 separate people who actually listened to the show.
And I think they might be on opposite sides of the world.
They could be. They could be. So the first one we received was from a nice gentleman named Alistair, which, well, here, I'll just give you sort of a summary because he went on a bit here. Said, I just wanted to drop you a line after you were looking for feedback after your last show, episode 17. I really enjoy your podcast. I like the content and the real life discussions you have, which I can relate to. And he goes on to say that he's currently listening to our back episodes, and he asks if we have done anything with pen testing. Personally, if I pick up a pen and it doesn't work, I just throw it away. So I don't really test them that thoroughly. Maybe that's not what he's talking about. What do you think?
No, that's definitely what he was talking about. I have a lot of pens. Look, like a whole big thing of pens.
You've got
all of them in here. Every once in a while, I pull one out and it doesn't work, and I throw it away.
Pen redundancy. If he was referring to penetration testing, I have not gone deeply into penetration testing. I've done some security audit work or not work, but I've been on the customer end of some security audits. You've probably been on the customer end of some more thorough penetration tests. We have been thinking about having an episode where we have a friend who is a recovering penetration tester.
That's a good way to put it.
And we've been thinking about having him on the show to just basically chat about what penetration testing is, how a business might prepare for one, how you might contract someone, what you should know, that sort of thing. That is nowhere near even scheduled. I can say that I ran into said friend last weekend, and I at least mentioned it to him, so it's on his radar. We'll just have to schedule something with him and figure out when we can have him on the show.
All right. So I have to share. So said friend got out of the pen testing arena and joined the blue team. And one of the first comments from friend regarding blue team was, how the hell do you guys do this? I'm so goddamn busy.
It's not quite the rock star life that he was used to, I suppose.
Yep. Turns out you don't have to just break in once. You have to prevent everybody from breaking in.
You have to prevent all of the bad guys from breaking in. You can't just break in and walk away and give them a report. I'm sure those reports are very grueling, but
I did respond back to Alistair.
So let me just finish quick. So Alistair goes on, says he can't remember how he found the podcast, but he's from across the pond in the UK, and he hosts his own Sysadmin podcast called Admin, which I have to say, if you get the joke, that is an awesome name.
Quite.
He goes on to say how he likes how we talked about Zimbra, and that he's unfortunately stuck in Office 365 hell. Though he doesn't use the word hell, he implies it.
I feel your pain.
He says he loves Zimbra and he runs it for his own mail servers. So do we. I run it not just professionally, but I run my own Zimbra server. So does Jason. And we both enjoy Zimbra because of its open nature and the fact that it's, easy to self-host and manage.
Wow.
So anyway.
Open-ish. But
continue whatever you were going to say.
Yeah, I responded to Alistair. We obviously are, we're not necessarily a security-centric podcast, so we will.
Though it might feel that way.
Yep, we will talk about pen test engagements at some point. We've decided to embark on a Docker-centric podcast for the next few, and we'll get there eventually. So I, appreciate the feedback, and we hope we're glad you're enjoying, and hope you continue to.
Yeah. So hopefully we'll get through. We've got at least 2 or 3 episodes where we're going to talk about Docker and some Docker management stuff. We're going to start that tonight. And then somewhere after that is our OpenStack revisit, discussion with John. We could talk about penetration testing in between those 2 things because John won't be back on until I believe it was September. So we could have
plenty of time.
We could have. I don't know if you think about it. I mean, July, August, September.
My glass is empty. Thinking is hard.
Thinking is hard after that old fashioned. Anyway, we've probably got about 3 or 4 episodes between now and when John's going to be back on. We could easily fill that up with Docker's talk. So I don't know.
Yep.
At any rate, the point is that
we'll get there.
Sometime in the next couple months, we will definitely get there. We'll have our friend on, assuming he's amenable to it. He seemed to be. and it should be fun. Should be a good time.
Yep. All right.
So I did mention that we had two, right?
Yep,
So the
we got
second one
another
is from a fellow named Chris. Chris is also a Patreon donor, and we love him for that. Thank you. So he starts his email with 12 out of 10, which I assume means he's rating us 12 out of 10. I mean, how else would you read that, right? Seriously, you guys are awesome. Keep up the great work. I love the cool, casual way you present the news and topic of the episodes. You had me at the title. You had me at Dresden. You had me at Linux. He suggests a book series, a Forgotten Realms based book series to give our episode parallels on, because they go up to 30-something books. We may look into that, but at this point, I think we've lost it. We've sort of lost that thread. Let's see here. He says he listens on his commute. He listens when he exercises. He listens when he's hanging out around the house. And most importantly, he listens while he's sysadmitting, hacksering, coding. I'm worried for
Chris. We're concerned about you.
I'm worried for your mental health, because consuming that much of this podcast, it just can't be good for you.
Chris, we're worried.
We are, definitely. And of course, he goes on to say thank you, and he's looking forward to stickers. And as I've mentioned already, unfortunately, they're not here yet.
I blame you.
You blame me. Well, it's because I had this thought to make stickers, and I just sort of pulled out my phone and did a quick Google search for places that make stickers, and I picked the first or second one on the list, submitted some artwork, and ordered stickers. I assumed it would go well. I shouldn't have done that.
So you got a step further than I would have. I would have gone, ooh, stickers. Oh, I don't art.
Well, I just took the artwork that we already had for the
which
that I had already
to begin with. Yeah.
Yeah. So. Yeah. I just took the artwork that I already created for our social media presence.
You're a step ahead.
Which I realized later doesn't contain our URL. So if we make a second run of stickers, whoever they're through, I may change the artwork up a bit to include our URL so people can actually find us.
We got to do coins.
Yeah, but I can't stick coins to my laptop. That's the whole point. I want a sticker to put on my laptop lid, because as I showed you a minute ago,
you can.
I dropped the same cable.
You could give a coin to somebody, and it's a challenge coin. So you pull your coin out, and if the other person doesn't have their coin, they have to buy you a beer.
Right.
It's a rule, people.
I still can't stick that to my laptop lid.
Well, you could.
I guess I could with
duct tape
Scotch tape or something.
Or wait, I got this cool fiber fix pen. It's really neat. You put this goopy stuff, and then you turn the light on, and it's got this blue light, and it just hardens immediately. It's the coolest thing.
Wow, that's awesome. So I could. That sounds like a bad solution. We need stickers.
We need stickers.
So
stickers big enough to put the coin underneath them.
That would be awesome. So anyway, the only other thing we could chat about is the Derby project, which is coming along slowly. I've actually created, at Jason's suggestion, a small web service which interacts with an OLED on a Raspberry Pi, and it's pretty freaking cool.
I may not have actually physically done anything on this project yet, but
that was a good idea. That was a dang good idea. So I'm still waiting on you and the other folks that are involved in this project to actually do, well, much of anything other than give me ideas.
Wait, I put my Raspberry Pi inside my new metal case thing.
The metal case that you had shown in a previous episode.
What the hell do they call that thing? I forget. Anyway, yeah. So I have
it. You're gonna have to pull it back out of that case so you can solder your leads for your OLED.
Oh.
Did you order an OLED screen yet?
Maybe.
You fail.
Yeah, pretty much do.
You fail. No, I am actually looking forward to getting more eyes on the code that I wrote, because it's very, very basic. I basically used Python and Flask to implement a very basic RESTful API, which you could use basically
Python and Flask.
Yeah, you can just use curl to write messages to the OLED, which is a huge step forward from previous incarnations of the Derby, where the display script, because it was what controlled the display, had a whole lot of the logic for the whole project in it, simply because a lot of the project or a lot of the tasks that were run on the Derby had to write to the display. So moving that to its own little web service disconnects all of that, and now I can write to the display in a much more ad hoc manner, which will, I think, actually open up the code, make things a lot simpler and a lot easier to write.
If you're going to go down the path of microservices, then build microservices. So
exactly,
this falls right into what is a microservice.
Yeah. So my next task is to build all of this into a Docker container so it's easy to redeploy, and then I'm going to release that back to the community so that people can use these things to control WinStar OLED displays on their Raspberry Pis. So I think it'll be good work. This is all building on the same library that we talked about in the past, that a coworker had written for us to make this display work, and that'll be included with the. It's already up on Docker Hub. I can include a link, I suppose, in the show notes if anyone's punching my mic again. If anybody's interested in the code, I can include a link to the GitHub repo where I have the microservice at. Currently, it's not containerized, but it will be hopefully soon. I was working on that last night. So yeah, I think it's safe to say that if you're going to DerbyCon and you want to be involved in this project, not from a design and build perspective, but from a contestant perspective, we will be releasing plans to how to build a contestant derby for this little project that we're working on. So the basic gist is, and I know I'm springing this on you. You had no idea I was going to talk about this, right, Jason?
What are you talking about?
What am I talking about? So what?
You can't tell them this. This is the secret part.
Well, see, we need to get people involved early enough that they have time to do this stuff. And even though we haven't finished it, we're going to have to let people know so they can be looking forward to it.
Guys, that's
the way I look at it. We're building attack derbies. So basically, the derby that I and possibly a few others are going to bring to DerbyCon are going to be these master derbies, which client or contestant derbies will report scores back to, or at least report interactions back to. The contestant derbies are all going to talk to each other based on wireless. And they're going to make some sort of exchange and report back to the master. And they're going to be scored based on, well, basically a contest between each derby. And then, you know, things will be scored and whatnot. The idea is that con goers will be able to build their own derby in whatever way they want to do, as long as they're running the right platform and they're running the right containers to make all this interaction happen and report, and you know, the reporting back to the masters. It should be a fun time. We haven't worked out whether there's going to be any actual prizes or anything. This is all to work, I don't want to say in conjunction with, but at least work along with the Hack Your Derby contest that goes on at DerbyCon.
Have you thought about the fact that since there's going to be a bunch of derbies that are pretty much the same, you're kind of going to get bumped out of the Hack Your Derby contest overall?
So I've been in touch with Deviant, and I don't think that he's really worked out exactly how this is going to work. To be honest, I'm not even in it for the contest anymore. Since we took first place last year, like that was awesome and all. I just want to build a cool derby. I want to build cool stuff and bring it to their.
As a quick aside, Deviant got married today, so to him and Tara,
oh yes,
congratulations!
Awesome. I didn't know that was today. I knew it was coming.
That was today.
Well, congratulations to Deviant and Tara.
Okay, back to derbies.
Back to derbies, right? So I mean, that's basically as much as we can release at this point. I'm going to write something up on hackmyderby.com. which people can read more about and figure out, and that's where eventually this stuff's going to be released, so that people can download it and play with it. So hopefully, if I can get the rest of the team motivated, Jason.
What? I came up with an idea.
Dustin. We can start knocking out some code and get these things actually built and released. If we don't get them out in August, we're gonna have a problem. So we've got July to get these things designed. I think August 1st is what we need to aim for.
We built the other first place Derby like in a night while we were at DerbyCon.
Yeah,
I mean, what could possibly go wrong?
We did, and that was an awesome time. But people who want to participate in this are going to need time.
Yep, agreed. So yeah, we're working on it.
So yeah, and, hopefully we can get
more details forthcoming.
Something out into the public by sometime in early August, so people have time to actually interact with this stuff and work on it. So yeah, cool stuff coming. Hopefully,
fun.
All right. So on to the main topic.
I was wondering if you're going to transition again.
Of course.
I told you I was going to screw up the waveform.
You did. See, if we do that enough, talk over it while the transition is occurring.
All right. Docker.
So Docker. All right.
Docker.
I guess we'll start at the most basic thing we can. What in the heck is Docker?
Docker. Docker is a platform for running packaged software. I'm making this shit up as I go along here.
I guess that's a good way to describe it. So picture, and I really hesitate to make this this comparison because it's really not. But picture a very, very, very stripped down virtual machine, but not quite. Right? So a Docker container is just that. It is a container for an application. In the virtualization world, you could call it a VM, except that a VM had an entire operating system, including its kernel, whether it was the same as the host or not, running within a protected space in memory.
But even more so, in the VM world, it was actually an emulated system. So you were literally emulating the CPU, you were emulating memory, you were emulating all of the interfaces. Everything was emulated.
Which is why you could run an OS2 server, on your Windows 95 workstation, or whatever. Or Windows 95 is a bad example. But on your machine, you can run. Right. For a long time, I ran a MS-DOS system inside a VMware workstation to emulate a BBS that I was tinkering with. All right, from on top of I believe it was on a Windows box. So operating system disparity is essentially what virtualization can get you. Where with Docker,
right. And if you take it to the extreme, you can get things like MAME and other emulators for like video games and Commodores and everything else.
Right. With Docker, you're getting a contained operating system. And it's not even the full operating system. It is and it isn't. It runs still on top of your host's kernel. So it's let's see how to describe this exactly.
It's walled off from the rest of the system.
It's an environment instead of an operating system. Instead of a virtual operating system, instead of a virtual system, it is simply an environment. If you're running a Debian Docker, a Debian container on top of your Red Hat host, it's technically still interacting with the Red Hat kernel.
Right.
But it is in an environment which makes your application feel more like it's running in Debian. Right? So your Docker container, you would interact with, or at least you'd build in a way that you would build a Debian system,
right?
That is in your configuration and whatnot, but it would still be running on your Red Hat host, right? I guess that's the best way I can describe a Docker.
Right. So with a virtual machine, you have a layer of abstraction where everything is being emulated for the system that is inside of the VM. In the case of a Docker container, that level of abstraction isn't there. You are running almost 100% on bare metal. I mean, you're pretty much running on the CPU at this point. And if you need access to hardware, you get direct access to that hardware.
Right. But that also means that with a virtual machine, that level of abstraction applies to every piece of hardware you want to present to your VM. That includes networking. It includes graphics in some cases. It includes, CPU and GPU, CD-ROMs, disk images, whatever, right? With a Docker container, all of that can be accessed, or I should say most of that can be accessed directly on the host operating system. It's all walled off using C groups and SE Linux. So basically, you have an application running directly on your host operating system, whether that's on Metal or inside of a VM by itself, which is then walled off using SE Linux contexts, and C groups. So basically, your application is still running in the host's kernel, but it's protected from the rest of the operating system. So something that's inside of your container should not be able to access the rest of your system, unless it can for bad reasons.
So SE Linux would be the security extensions for Linux. It goes kind of another level beyond simple permissions, where it's actually giving you permissions for ports, files, folders, and I believe it goes as far as permissions for execution as well.
Yeah, this is a layer that runs. It's a layer that runs between the user and the operating system.
Right.
So it's further extensible. Further permissions access to all the various things that Jason just mentioned.
Yep. And then C groups gives you the ability to dictate how much CPU and memory the system can use, amongst other things.
Right. So you can apply quotas to your Docker containers using C groups.
Right. So whereas with a virtual machine, you could come in and say, this VM gets 2 virtual CPUs and 2 gigs of memory. With a Docker container, what you'll say is that you can use up to 2 CPUs and you can use up to 2 gigs of memory.
Right. So if your Docker container routinely uses 512 meg of memory, it won't have carved out a chunk of 2 gig and allocated it to your Docker container in perpetuity.
Right. Right. And it's, I don't believe it actually, and maybe you can do this with C groups. I'm not 100% sure, but I don't believe it reserves it just for your container either. It's still shared amongst everybody.
Yeah, right. So that's what I was getting at.
Oversubscribe pretty easy.
Yeah. So I forget what the number was, but I heard from a Red Hat webinar, I believe, that I attended on Friday, that it's something like 20% better hardware utilization over virtualization in Docker. I could have that wrong, completely wrong.
Right.
Maybe I shouldn't even say that.
Right. So there is a better hardware utilization parameter, and there is a, which I believe is larger, a performance parameter that you can add as well. So whereas a VM usually runs pretty okay, a Docker container doing the same task can run it, since it's so much closer to bare metal, can run it significantly faster with less latency, because you don't have all those interpretations to make between your application and the actual hardware.
Right.
So
I mean, that covers pretty well what the heck a container is. Why would we want to use these things is, I mean, sort of obvious. It's basically from a performance perspective, you'll get better performance out of a Docker container. You'll be able to better utilize your hardware by running your applications inside of containers instead of VMs, simply because the footprint is smaller. Really so what it comes down to. And direct access to hardware is a big deal.
Right. So the container itself is a self-contained installation of partial OS and the software. For the most part, you actually have most of the pieces that you would need for the OS itself. So you'll have a kernel, and you'll have whatever supporting software you need. and then you'll have the software that you're trying to run. So for instance, if you had like an Nginx container, you have your kernel, you have your basic shell access, whatever, and then you have your Nginx software. The nice part about containers, at least the part that I really enjoy, is the fact that you can strip these down to the absolute bare minimum. So you can have just the kernel and just the Nginx software, and only the little bits that you need, the libraries that you need to run that Nginx software, which gives you a very, very small footprint, both in the size of the container, the attack surface that's available, and the ports that are open, etc. And even if an attacker were to break into the container, now they're inside of that container. Now there's really nothing in there for them to use. You don't have a host of software available. There's no compilers. There's no there's no TCP dump, etc. Like all that cruft that you may eventually aggregate on a host because it's been there for a long time, you won't have inside of a container because you don't need to install it.
Right. So imagine in the days of virtual server administration, right? You had to have a certain suite of tools available to you just to manage the system. Things like SSH, things like Python were there for, various management tasks and things that made the server run. Perl, lots of things that you would consider core to the operating system, a Linux operating system anyway. In the case of a container, and I'm going to use an example here, I started working on building a container for that OLED microservice that I was referring to. It's based on Raspbian because it's running on a Raspberry Pi, Docker on a Raspberry Pi. You need to run an operating system inside of that is still configured for use with the Raspberry Pi, the ARM processor that runs on the Raspberry Pi. Otherwise, all the binaries and whatnot aren't going to run on the thing. So anyway, Raspbian in Docker does not come with Python. It's just not there. So during when I'm instantiating my container or building my image for my container, I have to tell it, hey, install Python. Not just Python, but Python and all these various extensions that I need for my application to run.
Right.
And then, later in my configuration, I say, all right, I want to make sure that I'm getting the latest version of the code every time I build this thing. So I'm having it pull directly from the Git repo when it builds the container. Maybe that's the right way to do it. Maybe it's not. I haven't evaluated that yet. But it can't. This is the point where I stopped at last night because I was getting tired. It can't because it doesn't have SSH. Like the SSH binary doesn't even exist. So I'm going to have to either find a better way to get my code in there, which there are other ways. We can talk about that later. Or I'm going to have to have it install the SSH client. Otherwise, it can't do a Git pull.
Right.
So basically, my point is that Raspbian in a Docker container is not like the Raspbian that you've imaged to your SDI or your SD card to run Raspbian on your Raspberry Pi. It is a much more stripped down version, and it's designed to be that way. It makes the attack footprint for your applications so much smaller.
Right. And it's not just about attacks. So let's go back to, we can take the Raspbian image, for instance. One of the massive benefits that you get with using containers is repeatability. So when you build a container, when you instantiate that container, every single time you start that container from scratch, it's the same, identical every single time. Now, you can run that container for a period of time. You can stop and start it. And while it is already instantiated, it can change. But if you need to start from scratch again, from a repeatable point at which you know exactly what it looks like, when you restart that container, it's identical to what it was the first time you did it. And that's one of the biggest advantages of Docker, or one of the biggest perceived advantages. I'm a big fan of the security myself, but being able to say every single time, this Docker container is pristine when I run it is a massive benefit. And you can make simple changes to the containers and evolve them over time and you actually can take a look at the layers of the container and see what has changed. So probably explain that a little bit. When you build a container, it uses what's called a layered file system. So to build a container, you create what's called a Docker file, which is just very simply a text file with some commands in it. Every line of command in there that actually makes a file system change turns into a layer of the container, which has a couple of benefits. If you make changes to the Docker file, when you rebuild it, the only thing that's going to change is that layer, which makes it a little bit faster to rebuild. It also means that when you create new containers based on previous containers, for instance, you're going to start out with a base image of some sort, whether that's Raspbian or Alpine, Ubuntu, whatever. That same image is going to be used. So if you choose to create so let's say an Alpine image, every single time you create an Alpine image, it's going to use that same base image. You don't have to re-download that image. It's already on your system. It's going to use the same base image every time. That's that whole repeatability piece. And then it'll create the new layers on top of it of what you need. So at each step, you're just adding new layers to the system.
Right. So layered approach is definitely better. I mean, for the same reasons that you mentioned, for repeatability and for ease of rebuild. It also makes updating a little cleaner, I would think.
Right.
Simply because you can update something that's later in the build or add to the end of the build, and you're not changing the base layer, right? So, I mean, if you want to put this in perspective, imagine every time you wanted to release a new version of your web application, you had to build a brand new VM for it.
Right.
Because that's essentially what you're doing with a Docker container. You're building a new base image, and you're destroying the old container and bringing up a new one. Now, I know that in the cloud era of image-based builds and whatnot, the OpenStacks and the AWSs and whatever, that's actually sort of the way you do it anyway, right? You're building a new version of your web application. You may be instantiating a new VM to run it on. But imagine doing that in the older era where you're, even if it's an automated build, right, through some build system, you're installing an operating system, then you're configuring your application layer, then you're putting your code in place, then you're making sure it all works, and then you're standing it up and putting it into production. A Docker container does that in seconds, where doing that on a full system could take you, at best, I'm going to say half an hour. Because I can say that I can churn out a full VM in the old style where I'm kicking it out with satellite in about half an hour. And then, to deploy the application might be another 15, 20 minutes, depending on on the quality of your code and whatnot. But again, a Docker container is, define your Docker file, and assuming that's already done when you're doing this, because you're installing, you're updating your code, not building a whole new instance of it. It could take seconds, maybe minutes, depending on the speed of the machine you're doing it on and how much it has to do.
Right. And this is where that layered container system comes in, because in a lot of cases, when you're updating a container, let's for instance, GitLab is a really nice web-based Git system, very similar to GitHub. When you update that, it's not going to re-download the OS. It's not going to it only downloads those layers that have changed, which is usually only 1 or 2 layers. So it's quicker to download. It's quicker to download the image. Your previous image continues to exist. It doesn't go away. It's still there. You can purge it later if you want to, but it's still there. And when you reinstantiate that, minus the data that you've actually, like your actual data for the application, it's starting a fresh new container from scratch each time. So, for instance, take a normal desktop. Let's say you use Thunderbird for email. Through the years, as you've used Thunderbird, it's updated itself over and over and over again. And anybody who's used, something like pretty much any application on a computer knows that after a time, the file system surrounding that application tends to end up getting a little messy. You end up with just files that aren't used anymore, and they never get cleaned up. Something gets missed somewhere.
You ever done a Windows 95 to Windows 98 upgrade? Oh my god!
Right. So a Docker container, since it's a fresh install every time, it's not an update to existing software. So you're freshly installing that application in that container every time. You don't have that leftover cruft from before.
So using my example of the Windows 95 to Windows 98 upgrade, it's more akin to I'm running Windows 95. Now I want to go to Windows 98. I've flattened my computer, installed Windows 98, and then magically all of my configuration and applications and whatnot have appeared on top of my Windows 98 container.
Right.
Or Windows 98 workstation, or whatever you want to call it.
Exactly.
So yeah, Docker makes that whole process obviously on a much smaller scale than a full desktop OS, because I don't know that anybody has tried to run desktop OS inside of Docker yet. Of course they have. Someone has.
Paul was talking about Kali Linux and trying to see if he could figure out how to get that stuff to run in Docker. So
somebody's running VDI on top of Docker.
Yeah, he may lose his mind doing it, but it's possible. I guess.
So anyway, point is layered file system or layered containers. Make updates a lot cleaner. So trying to think where to go next. I know one of the things, or two of the things that snagged me when I started tinkering with Docker containers was first storage. Where do I keep my persistent storage? Because if I've got a container that I'm going to destroy and rebuild every time I'm going to deploy a new version of my application, obviously there's going to be some data that has to persist. And I don't mean your database, because that's going to be in a separate container. I mean things like uploaded files and whatnot. And then, of course, the other thing that snags you is networking. How do things reach your Docker containers? And we could probably have a separate episode about all of the options for networking. Storage, I think we could probably tackle tonight.
Sure. 3 basic means of storage in Docker. Now, there's a lot of storage options. These are the 3 very vast basic ideas. You've got local storage, which is on the host machine that Docker container is running on, which is literally a directory on that machine somewhere that you map to a directory inside the Docker container. It's very straightforward, simple to do.
Consider that each time you build the Docker container, there is writable storage that comes along with your container. However, it's not persistent writable storage. If you destroy that container in the course of an update or a replacement or whatever, the files you may have expected to persist will be lost with the container.
Right.
These host-based storage containers that Jason just alluded to are similar. However, they would be a separate container, which is basically just for storage, that would not be destroyed in the course of an update.
Right. So those are. I was talking about local storage. Those are volume. Container.
I'm sorry. Okay. Sorry if I led off in the wrong direction.
All right. Yep. No problem. So we've got local storage, which is on the host operating system. You create.
You're talking about like a volume mapping.
Right. So you create a directory on the host on the host machine, and you map that to a directory in the container. So, for instance, I like to use /srv as the location for files for inside of the containers. It just seems to match. So you want to take, say, an Nginx container. So you may have like /srv/nginx/conf.d. You're going to map that inside of the container to /etc/nginx/conf.d. It's a straight one-to-one mapping. So those are directories. You can do directories or files. What Nate was talking about a moment ago was what's called a storage volume, which is very similar to a Docker container itself, except that there's no executable in there. There's no it's just a raw store. It's just a chunk of storage that's created. You can use these They work very well for certain things. They also become a little bit harder to manage when you're dealing with backups, or if you want to actually look through the file system or anything like that, because in order to access them, you have to access them through a Docker container. It's
Right.
not a file system that you can actually just see on the host machine.
Right. So to give you an example of the local storage that Jason was talking about, on the Derby project from last year and the year before, I'm trying to remember the exact use case I used here. So basically, I ran Docker on a Raspberry Pi inside of a Derby to run a CTF, right? Capture the flag contest. So one of the things that had to happen in some of the cases, so basically I took all the various services that people might be attacking and put them in Docker containers. And the Docker containers contained codes, right? And where the containers got the codes from, because they were all generated and unique, was from the host operating system. And the way I did that was I had a local directory on the Raspberry Pi that was seen by the host Raspbian operating system, and an iNotify script that would simply write a new code to those files, right? Every time someone accessed the file, it'd put a new code in the file. And then that was made accessible to the Docker containers. So in this case, I have both the host operating system and the container looking at the same file, right? So that's one use for local storage. There was also a case where one of the flags, when you popped that container, you could write to my OLED display. And the only way I could figure out how to do that was it just wrote a file to a mapped volume within the Docker container, which then the host could read. And the display script would periodically check to see if that file existed and if there was something in it, and then it would read it into the script. With the volumes, the Docker volumes, the difference is that you can't directly access the file system within that volume without connecting another container to it. And what you could do is you could build a container that just runs SSH as its service, and you could SSH into the thing and modify the files, or Samba, or whatever.
Right.
So, or you could just run a container that gets you a shell, and you run it in interactive mode. That's another way to handle that sort of thing. But for things like backups, you'd almost have to, like, say you're using, I don't know, Amanda as your backup tool. You'd almost have to, I guess you'd have to build a Docker container that runs the Amanda client, right? That then has access to that
yeah,
volume.
that would simultaneously mount the volume. Yep, I guess you could do that. Right. I haven't found a whole lot of uses for volumes for like data volumes like that. I tend to use them if I'm just screwing around with something and I just need a quick place to put data, and then I erase them later. They're very easily deleted through the Docker tools.
Right.
So with local storage, if all you have is a single Docker host, local storage is fine. Doesn't really matter.
Yeah. This is the other caveat with local storage.
Where when you get into multiple, like a cluster of Docker hosts, whether that's through, Docker Swarm or Kubernetes or any of these cluster Docker systems,
which we will happily talk about in a later episode.
Yep. So local storage becomes less useful, because now the part of the reason that you would create a cluster is that if one of the hosts goes down, you continue running. Well, sure. If you're depending on local storage and that host that has the local storage goes down, well, your storage is gone. So
now I know there's probably people saying, oh, well, you could share local storage via something like a network-based file system, or like a SAN with clustering software on top of it, right? That sort of, it removes some of the simplicity that Docker containers will present, and there are better ways. We'll put it that way.
Yep. And that also kind of, it's no longer local storage, now it's shared storage.
Sure, but it's still mapped in the same way that local storage would have been.
Yeah,
or it could be. It could be.
So when you deal with the data volumes, and I haven't, I'll be honest, I haven't played a whole lot with this, but data volumes can migrate theoretically between hosts. But they're also very often on local storage, so migration is not easy. Third type of storage that I've dealt with is a shared storage medium. So whether you're talking about a SAN, a NAS, S3, something along those lines, what you're looking for is a storage medium that is either replicated in the back end somehow between multiple machines, or is completely separate from the system and replicated on its own through, like a SAN is replicated through all the servers, etc. And then you'll store your data there, and you'll map it inside of your container, and put all your storage there. That way, if there is a failure somewhere, when the container spins up elsewhere, you still have access to that storage.
Right. And these solutions could be something like Gluster. They could be Ceph. There's probably a number of other things. I mean, it could be something as simple as just NFS.
Right. Yep. Now, NFS usually means that it's on a single server somewhere. But, I mean...
Right. But it would get the job done, is the point.
Yep. Yep, as long as that single server doesn't fail.
Yeah. So I mean, if you're gonna go to the effort to having a cluster, you may as well have a clustered backend as well, clustered storage backend, and something like Gluster or Ceph.
Right.
Any number of other things can do that for you.
As with most things, the fancier you get, the more complicated it's going to get. So, as you ramp up and decide that you need more than one Docker host, then you need to look at some sort of clustered storage. I mean, it's going to get more complicated. The trick is making sure that you don't get, you should avoid getting more complicated than is necessary.
Right.
Which I mean, I'm not sure how to put in words how to prevent that. That's it's one of those things that you kind of learn over time. I mean, when you have enough scar tissue built up, you'll understand, which way to go. But it takes a while. You're going to make mistakes.
And mistakes, when it comes to the services that run your company, are bad.
Well, yes and no. I mean,
depends on if you learned from them, right?
Right. So I mean, it's interesting. A lot of companies will like freak out and say like, you made a mistake and it costs $1 million. You're out of here, and fire you. And other companies will say, I just spent $1 million training you not to make that mistake again. So,
right.
There's different views on it.
All right. So I guess the next thing would be networking. Again, we could probably have a separate. Maybe our next episode will dive a little more deeply into networking and software-defined networking and whatnot. But at its very basics, you can map networking either per IP or per port or whatever from your host to your Docker applications, right? So, like by
default, your Docker containers are natted.
Right.
You can bypass this and change these things, but by default, it's natted.
In a case where they are natted, and I've worked with this in some cases, you can basically map ports on your host to your containers in a similar way that you might port forward from your router at home, to your own cloud box behind it.
Yep.
So like
works almost identical.
8002 might be port 80 on my Docker container. And if I go to, dockerhost.mydomain.com :8002, it gets me to port 80 on my container, which is a very viable way to develop software or run, little one-off instances of things for testing and whatnot. If you're going to do this for reals and you're going to do it for production, you're going to look into a more robust way to manage that. Another way you can do it on a single host is by simply mapping additional IPs to your Docker host, and then you can map those IPs to your containers, which is the way I did it on the Derby because it was quick and dirty, and I knew I didn't have to cluster it.
One neat thing about the networking that Docker has is that it's fairly robust. You don't have to expose ports to your host.
Right.
So, for instance, if you have a web server, let's say you have a Splunk box So you've somehow convinced Splunk to run inside of a container. It's possible. I've done it. It's kind of neat.
You've lost several goats and chickens in the process.
So you've got Splunk running inside of a container, and you want to put a web proxy in front of it. And this is where some of the security niceties come into play. What you can do is actually not expose any of the ports in the Splunk container to the host operating system, and only expose port 80 and 443 from your proxy to the host operating system. Inside of Docker itself, as long as they're on the same network, two Docker hosts can talk to each other on any port. That's default Docker networking. Now, the overlays that you can do for SDN add all sorts of niceties and ACLs and everything else. But by default, inside of the same network, two Docker hosts can talk to each other on any port.
So this is similar to the host-only networking that you might have seen on your virtualization platforms of the past, except that, I guess, in this case, the host may not even be able to see the network. So it's almost like a guest-only network.
Right. It's all hidden behind the Docker networking shroud, if you will. So the only thing that gets exposed are the ports that you tell it to expose.
Now, I wouldn't go so far as to say that this is foolproof.
No, nothing's foolproof.
But that's the way it's designed, is what it comes down to.
Right. But it is foolproof, quote, foolproof in air quotes, from the aspect of if you have a dozen containers running on your Docker host, running all sorts of different pieces of web software, and they all come through that single Nginx proxy, the only ports that you will be able to access are the ports that are exposed on that Nginx proxy. So you'll never see the ports for the other containers outside of that host. There's no way to get to them.
Right.
It's all done internally, which is pretty slick.
Yeah. So you can effectively isolate your application from the world.
Right.
And put your Nginx proxy or whatever in front of it, all on the same host.
Right. And when you get to clustered systems and you start dealing with some of the networking overlays that you can use, Flannel, Calico, Weave, etc., it adds all sorts of additional options, ACLs and crazy naming and all sorts of really cool rule sets that you can do.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you think you can fill another episode with that chat, I think we'll do that next time around. Does that sound good?
We can discuss a bit of it. I'm still very much a neophyte when it comes to a lot of the SDN stuff, but there's a lot there. There's a lot you can do.
You've delved further into it than I have. So, if you think about the power of container-to-container networking, this doesn't have to apply to just your Nginx proxy to your web application. It could also be, your web application to your LDAP backend, or your web application to its data store, to its database, whatever it is, assuming that those things are running in containers as well.
Right. So the nice part is, in a lot of cases, in a full Docker environment, none of the database systems are exposed to the outside world.
Right.
And again, in air quotes, when you're dealing with clustered systems, the ports themselves are not exposed. There is communication between servers, and there is the possibility of attack, but a lot of that has been masked away. But as far as the applications are concerned, they can all hit the database, but nobody can. Like, you could never hit port 3306 on a MySQL server from outside of my network, because it's not exposed.
Which, I mean, obviously, these things can also be attained on, a segmented network.
Right.
Even in my own hypervisor that I run most of my applications on, my MySQL server is on a private network that's only accessible from within my hypervisor.
Right.
So Docker can take that a level further and say that it's only accessible from your other containers.
Right.
So I suppose that in that case, if I wanted to manage my MySQL database directly via the command line, I'd have to do it from another Docker container.
Right.
Correct?
Yep. Or from the host, you can run. It depends on how you have it set up, but you can run the MySQL commands directly inside that container. But yeah,
right.
Yeah, there's quite a bit of security that you can add to this. And then I mean, if you want to get really crazy, then you get into immutable host OSs, and we can go down that path another day. But
gets pretty crazy.
Good fun stuff there.
All right, so next time around, maybe we'll tackle networking, and if we don't have enough to fill the whole episode for networking, maybe we'll look into immutable OSs as well. And then after that, I think we'll start talking about the various orchestration suites, like Kubernetes,
DCOS, Swarm,
OpenShift, Swarm, like all those things. So, all right. So, unless you had something else you wanted to chat about tonight, I think we may as well call it a night.
Yep. It's been a long night.
It has been, and we've, whatever. Luckily, it's a holiday tomorrow, so I don't have to wake up for those work in the morning.
For those of you in the U.S., enjoy your holiday tomorrow. For those of you across the pond, sorry we won.
Happy Insurrection Day, you traitorous buggers. Right?
Yeah, something like that.
All right, so I guess we'll call it a night. Let's see, here it is. All right, if you want to find our episodes online, look at ironsysadmin.com. If you want to look us up on Patreon, again, we love money. Hold on, I should probably follow it up with a thank you or something, right?
I guess. What are we doing?
Anyway, we do this because we enjoy it. However, there are expenses, and anything you want to throw our way is awesome. I don't care if it's 5 cents or $20, whatever.
Whoa! Make sure they're not throwing like big things at us, because it hurt.
Don't throw anything heavy. Well, unless it's really valuable.
If you want to throw a gold brick at me, I mean,
I'll take it. Okay. I'll take that lump. Anyway, patreon.com/ironsysadmin. Again, you don't owe us anything. We do this because we like it. But please, there are expenses, and well, I've already said this. Anyway, anything you can give us is very appreciated. Facebook.com/ironsysadmin, as well as Twitter.com/ironsysadmin. Also, if you're not watching us on YouTube, well, you're probably not missing much. But if you want to watch us on YouTube, ironsysadmin.com/YouTube will get you there. You can also find the podcast on iTunes, as any good podcast will be, and Stitcher Radio, because why not? All right. Any final words there, Jason?
You can find me at Xenophage. There's an X in there, and at least one of our Patreon members knows how to spell it now.
Yes, we now have a Patreon donor who has hit the $10 mark. Over the $10 mark, in fact. Again, thank you. And I have sent them the proper spelling of Jason's Twitter handle, because that's so valuable.
I guess.
As I mentioned before, once I get stickers and I'm happy with their quality, I will be putting them in as a Patreon reward, I think. So I'll let you know when that happens, and then you can get stickers, because stickers are awesome, right?
Yes, love me some stickers.
I mean, who doesn't like stickers? I could show you my laptop again, but I'll drop that USB cable a third time. Wow, look at that. Stickers.
We got coffee and beer, and I mean, we've got Dark Sim.
That's awesome. Look at the stickers I've got.
But do you have a sticker sheet of Vim commands?
No, I don't
think so.
I've got a coffee mug.
You do?
The mug of Vi.
The mug. True.
I do.
Forgot about the mug of Vi.
I do. So anyway, good night, everybody, and thanks for listening. So it looks like Dustin joined us on the live chat, but neither of us noticed.
Now he's gonna want attention.
I'm just gonna go say hi. I don't know if he's still there or not.
Hang on, let's see. Iron / YouTube. Oh crap! I'm gonna hear myself in a second. Oh no, I'm not. Why did he go to the live thing? Oh, it doesn't show the live stuff, does it?
What do you mean? It shows the live stuff. What are you talking about?
I'm on the YouTube channel and I'm not seeing us live right now.
Oh, it should.
There we go. I got to click somewhere else.
Yeah.
Difficulties.
If you went to ironsysadmin.com/YouTube, it would have taken you right to the proper place.
I mean,
that was where you tell me that you did that and went the wrong place. And we fix it.
We acknowledged his existence, and then he started throwing bad jokes out. It's horrible.
He wants to throw a brick at us.
I know, right?
A brick. Not. He didn't even specify a brick of gold.
Right.
Even a brick of silver.
What's red and hurts your teeth? That's not a gold brick.
Oh, right.
That's a red brick.
Red gold. Is there red gold? There's pink gold. Rose gold. I'm going to say that he's going to throw a brick of rose gold at us.
Lots of yelling going on in the background here.
Awesome. Well, at least the explosions and screaming children have stopped. Because it's the 4th of July!
Oh, somebody's yelling at my dog.
Wow. Well, I mean, he says he has no gold. I'm thinking that a no gold brick would not be very valuable.
I want heavy coin.
Litecoin? What is Litecoin? I don't even know.
It's a Bitcoin variant.
Oh, good.
Dustin's on a Litecoin Ethereum kick at the moment, where he's trading things back and forth and making money.
Is he mining any of them?
No, he's just watching and making money on when things dip.
Dogecoin.
Could do Dogecoin.
God.
All right. Do we click the button and close down the live
and end this thing? All right.
Thing.
Anybody, which is probably only Dustin, who's stuck around to watch the YouTube feed, thank you for watching and good night.